siblings, welcome to Scout the Pages. Today we're going to talk about all of the books that I read in November. My reading schedules have been working out super well. Even if I fell off at the end of the month, I still read more than I've read in so many months. I'll put up a graphic here so you can see my statistics over the year and how much this reading schedule has changed my stats. I'm reading so much. So let's talk about all of the books that I read in November. First, we have Starter Villain by John Scalzi. This is a book about a man who finds out that he's inherited a business, and that business is owned by his uncle that he never shared a relationship with, who passed away recently. It's a hilarious satire about cats that are villains. They have little keyboards. It's hilarious. I'm just gonna say it's really funny. It's like Megamind for adults, I guess, if you want to say, or Cats and Dogs for adults. It's really funny. I really enjoyed it, and I think if you like that sense of humor, you're really going to like this book. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, which is a 7.14 out of 10 on Cawpile. I would highly recommend this book to any cat lovers in your life or anyone who likes a good silly book. Next, I have a book that's part of a video I'm doing where I read a bunch of Audible originals, and that is The Weirdies. This book lived up to its name. It was extremely weird and bizarre and quirky. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I don't think it was excellent. It was okay. I gave it a 6.14 out of 10 on Cawpile. I would recommend it for a family read if you have a long car ride or something, or you're trying to get your kid into audiobooks. This one was pretty funny. The narration was really good. It was very cinematic. I can honestly say that I recommend it, even if it is a little bizarre and a little gross at times. I also read the second book in that series, which is The Weirdies Get Weirder, and I liked this one a little bit more because I feel like the first one ended kind of abruptly, and the second one has more of a plot to it with more world. I really enjoyed it. This one had me cackling more than the first one. I still gave it 3 stars, but I gave it a 6.50 on Cawpile this time. Again, I would highly recommend this little duology if you need a long car ride listen. The next book I read is for a video where I try reading poetry, even though I'm not a big fan of poetry, and then I tried writing poetry. You'll have to check out that video if you want to see how my poetry ended up turning out. But one of the books that I read for that video was Home by Whitney Hansen. I love Whitney Hansen's Instagram Reels content where she reads her own poetry. I think her spoken word is really beautiful. I was not as impressed with the written version of these poems, and I don't think that's because they're bad. I just think that the medium for these is through Whitney Hansen's delivery. I think it's very important to have Whitney Hansen reading these to us. Overall, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't what I expected overall. And ultimately, it wasn't something that changed my life or touched my soul in any way. I actually found this to be a little bit too depressing and not as strong of a book as I would have preferred. I think the messages in here are okay for a young person maybe going through their first breakups, but as a married woman who doesn't really struggle with putting too much of myself in other people, this one just really didn't hit home for me. But it was still good, and I still think it is extremely valuable to those who will connect with the message. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, or a 6.07 out of 10 on Cawpile. I would recommend if you need a book about putting too much of yourself in others and feeling lost after a breakup. But more than anything, I would recommend Whitney Hansen's Instagram. I will link it down below. For that same video, I read The Way Back Home by Courtney Peppernell. I've read Courtney Peppernell's works before, and they're very hit or miss for me. I do find that they are inspiring, and they do have some good messages in them. I liked Watering the Soul a little bit more. I liked that it was a personal journey. I liked the messages, and I agreed with them. This one, on the other hand, I really was not a fan of the breakup situation, the putting a lot of oneself in another. There's a theme here. I accidentally picked up 2 books that I thought were about something else, and it ends up being about, you know, putting too much of your identity in another person and then them leaving you. There was just a lot of grief, a lot of feeling lost, and I didn't feel like the messages in here were super good either. I found myself scratching out statements and rewriting them to be more healthy for an individual, because the journey in this book, this is a spoiler, so skip if you don't want a spoiler for the poetry, but this is like the pandemic has begun and this person is feeling lost and they go through a breakup during the pandemic, and the way that they find their way back home is through another relationship. And the same thing happens here. I don't agree with that. I don't think we should be finding ourselves in another relationship. I think the message should end up being finding ourselves in ourselves and healing ourselves, and a relationship can come after that. It gave me the wrong impression is what I'll say, and it's just not something that I personally agree with, although I did highlight some sections. The part of the journey that I did enjoy the most was finding love. Again, I don't agree that we should find ourselves in love, but these were the only poems that I really connected with because it made me think of my husband, and I think that's a positive thing. I'm in a very positive era. I'm on an upward trajectory towards healing right now, and that means that the negative, gloomy, and hopeless stuff isn't really connecting with me, while the hopeful, positive, and uplifting stuff is connecting with me. So I found myself gravitating towards those poems and phrases, while most of the book, I'd say 80% of it, was just too much negativity and gloominess. It's a completely valid thing to be in these books. Like, I don't question why they're there. It's just not for me. I could see how this would be very validating for people who are going through these things and 80% of their emotions are negative. So I just want to make that clear. I gave this a 6.50 out of 10 on Compile, which is a 3 out of 5 stars. Again, I probably won't be buying any more poetry books. Check out that video if you want my in-depth thoughts on both of these, but it was okay. I gained a little bit from it, and I used this to inspire my own poetry in that video, and that was a lot of fun. Next, I listened to 3 books from the Hilda tie-in series. I listened to them on Audible because I have an Audible subscription and they are free with Audible originals. They were okay. I read The Hidden People, The Great Parade, and The Nowhere Space. What I got from this experience is that I would recommend just watching the show instead. I read the graphic novels a few years back and absolutely loved them. I'm gonna do a video where I compare all of the Hilda content at some point, so stay tuned for that. But the tie-in books are a watered down kind of structure of the show. The show has a lot more content, a lot more heart, a lot more scenes, and I feel like it's just overall more well developed. These tie-in books felt jumpy. They felt like we were skipping stuff, and I've watched the show, so I know what they were skipping, and it kind of made me sad. At the end of the day, if you need a car listen and you've already engaged with the Hilda world, these are fine. They're okay. I listened to all 3 pretty quickly. They're very short. They're very cinematic. The audio mix was a little off if you're going to listen to the audio version. The voice that was narrating was really loud, but then they put clips from the show when characters are speaking into the audiobook, and that audio mix was super low. So I kept having to like turn it really up high to hear the voices that are stitched in, but then the narrator would be too loud. So that was my issue with that, which is kind of silly because the whole idea behind those audiobooks is that they're immersive and like super well attuned for listening, but I found that the audio mix just was not balanced at all. So would I recommend these books? Only if you need more Hilda content and you already watched the show and read the graphic novels, then yes, I would give these a shot if you need an audiobook that's short and quick to listen to. But I would not recommend them on their own. If you are going to experience Hilda for the first time, I would recommend the graphic novels or the TV show. More so the TV show since it's more complex and developed than the graphic novels are. I gave Hilda and the Hidden People 7.14 out of 10 stars, which is a 4 out of 5. And then I gave Hilda and the Great Parade a 7.14 out of 10. That's a 4 out of 5. And I think the last one is the same. Yep, 7.14 out of 10, a 4 out of 5 stars for Hilda and the Hidden Space, or the Nowhere Space, sorry. So I would highly recommend Hilda in general, but I don't think I would recommend the tie-in books to start. Next, I read the 2 volumes of Sourceline that are available in English in the United States. I believe there's going to be a 3rd book because this ends on a cliffhanger. I thought it was a duology, which was kind of disappointing because these are really, really good. I wanted to finish them out all at once, which is why I bought them both on Prime Day at the same time. I adored these. so much. I'm so glad I went out on a whim and trusted my gut and bought these. They were so good. They're definitely those gothic fairy tale vibes. There's mythology, cryptids. It's basically about these students who are going to this island to train under a cryptologist, like a zoologist but for cryptids, for mythical creatures on this island, who come to him for help. And these students are training against each other to become his apprentice, and there's just some mystery that happens. There's a lot of stuff that happens in these two books. It's amazing how much plot are in these. It doesn't feel too fast. There are some times where I do feel like we get a time skip, and I would have liked to see those scenes that are mentioned but not shown, if that makes any sense. I really enjoyed these. It was mildly predictable, but I didn't even care because it was just so good and so fascinating and so well executed. It definitely is giving Coraline, Mavis from Hotel Transylvania kind of vibes. I loved this so much. If you like the aesthetic of Coraline and Hotel Transylvania and all of that, I would highly recommend Sourceline, the graphic novels. They were so much fun. I gave Sourceline book 1 an 8 out of 10 on Compile, which is a 4 out of 5. And then I gave Sourceline 2 an 8.29 out of 10, which is also a 4 out of 5 stars. Again, really excellent books. I couldn't recommend them enough. Next, I read The Secret Garden on 81st Street. This was a lot sadder than I thought it would be. It is not what I thought. I don't know if in a past video I said it or not, but I thought this was one of the sci-fi novels that Andy Weir took part in, where they rewrite old classics into like sci-fi versions. I believe that book was called Cheshire Crossing. This one, on the other hand, is not that. This was really sad. It was contemporary. It's a retelling of The Secret Garden, but it was really hard to read. There's a lot of panic disorder, anxiety disorder representation, neglectful parenting, orphans. It was very sad and kind of hard to read, but it was so beautiful and so worth it. If you have a child who has a panic disorder or anxiety disorder, or knows someone who does and you would like them to have compassion and empathy for that person, I would highly recommend this graphic novel. It was so good. The representation was excellent. The grief representation was also really good. The messages overall were just really amazing. I just wouldn't expect a super happy, hopeful book based on the art style, because I was mistaken for sure. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, which is a 7.79 out of 10. It was really good. I'd highly recommend it. Very quick read, and the art style is very happy and beautiful. Even if the story is a little sad and hard to read, the end is happy. Next, we have The School for Good and Evil by Soman Chainani. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I had such high expectations for this book. My little sister read the entire series when she was a kid and really loved it and tried to get me to read it a few years ago. I was too busy at that time. I finally picked up a copy this year. I bought it. I purchased it with my money because I was so excited to get into this. The concept is fascinating. I have to say, the first like 40% of the book I adored. I was all in on this book. I had no complaints really for a middle grade to early young adult book, but once you hit certain plot points in this book, it gets so weird, and there's so much internalized transphobia and homophobia. The sexism is rampant. This book had so many issues that I wouldn't have believed you if you told me it was published in the 2000s, but it was, and that breaks my heart. I had such high expectations for this because it's so popular. I had never heard from anyone that this was as problematic as it is. Will it change later in the series? Are they planting these things to prove them wrong later? Maybe. But you should do that in the current book because kids have a short attention span, and I have a short attention span. None of that was corrected in this. There's a very, very strange non-consensual scene in this book, and it's a kid's book. Things just happen in this book that are bizarre and not in a cool way. I felt so dirty reading this book, and ultimately I did not like it. I will not be continuing on in the series. Stay tuned for this. I have a surprise at the end of this video for a few of the books on this list. I would hesitate before giving this to your own child if you are trying to raise a more progressive human. This definitely gave me the ick. I gave this a 5.69 out of 10 or a 3-star on Cawpile because I think it was super well written. I just don't agree with the messages. Next, I read Clementine Fox. This was a super cute graphic novel about a child who is struggling with math and doesn't like studying because they don't like doing things that are hard, because hard things are not fun. And she goes on this adventure with her friends, and there's magic and there's creatures, and it's got anthropomorphic little creatures, kind of like Zootopia. I really enjoyed this a lot. I loved the messages. I love that at the end, the little fox figures out that like learning something hard can actually be really fun if you do it in a way that's conductive to your own learning style. They found her a tutor that she liked. It was super cute, super magical, and super adventurous. I would highly recommend it. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars for a 7.46 out of 10 on Cawpile. Next, we have a book by an author that I really love. Her graphic novels have always blown me away, and that is Tilly Walden's Are You Listening? I want to say that I enjoyed this book, but I didn't. I think it was a really important book with really important messages. It's definitely more speculative, magical realism kind of fiction going on here. The imagery is absolutely stunning. The messages are important. They are valid. They're what's happening to real people. But I caution you, though, there are so many content warnings for this book I was unaware of. I should have done my due diligence. The cover does look kind of sad, but there's no way I could have known what was going to be in it. I just picked it up knowing it was Tilly Walden, and that was my bad. This book left me pretty triggered. I had a lot of anxiety after it. It was really hard to read. It was painful in a beautiful, heartbreaking kind of way, but still painful, and left me feeling dirty for several days to even weeks. I'm still recovering from reading this book, unfortunately, so I am not going to give it a rating. I will present to you the content warnings for it. I think this would be really good for teenagers who maybe need some more education on these topics. It has amazing queer representation. I do enjoy that, but otherwise, I think it's just a very heavy book, so be cautious going in and be cautious recommending it.
I somehow forgot to talk about a few books, so let's talk about those now. First, we have a graphic novel called Frizzy by Claribel A. Ortega. This is a coming-of-age story about a girl with hair that's very frizzy, and she learns how to love her hair over time and change her mother's opinions on cultural hair. I loved the conversations around internalized racism, especially in regards to hairstyles and hair care. I would recommend this book for anyone with a complicated relationship with their hair. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars or a 7.69 out of 10 on Cawpile. Next, we have a trilogy in the Avatar Last Airbender comics. This is The Rift. I especially loved the conversations around family, religion, tradition, parenting, pollution, and warehouse workers and machines. This trilogy didn't hit as hard as the previous comic trilogies, but I still really enjoyed it and gave it a 5 out of 5 stars or a 9 out of 10 for all 3 volumes.
Next, I read this little book here twice, and the reason for that is because I found the audiobook for this at my library and thought it was just an audiobook and listened to it, and it was amazing and I couldn't stop thinking about it, but it felt like there was something missing that I wasn't getting from the audiobook, so I looked it up and it's a graphic novel. That would explain why. It was kind of choppy, and that's because it has these beautiful illustrations that really are important to the story. So I ended up reading this twice because I accidentally listened to a visual novel. That's my bad, 100%, but I really enjoyed this. This left me thinking, it left me contemplating and introspective. I don't know what about it I really enjoyed. I just couldn't stop thinking about it and still haven't. So I ended up buying a physical copy because I enjoyed it that much. If you have a kid, this is a great little like fairy tale retelling. It was very interesting, very spooky, but not too scary. And I really enjoyed it, even if it felt like there was just a bunch of information withheld from the reader. I didn't feel like I needed it. It left room for me to be creative and make my own reasons behind the characters' actions. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars with a 7.51 out of 10 on Cawpile. The next book I have I DNF'd, and that is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. I was very excited for this book. It's advertised as a gothic romance with death, with a mystery. I was very intrigued by it, and I still am. I just could not get over the relationship between her and Death, it just didn't click for me. And I think it's a personal thing entirely that I'm not a huge fan of the really, really old ethereal being interested in a child that he's seen from the time it was a newborn. It's just kind of creepy to me. And that's fine, because every single one of my friends ever who has read this has absolutely adored it and given it 5 out of 5 stars. So with that said, I would love to gift all of you for the holidays this year. I may not have finished this book, but this edition is absolutely beautiful. Let me show it to you, because I'm going to be doing a giveaway in this video for this book. Look at this beautiful edition. If you would like this beautiful book, or you would like this beautiful book here, The School for Good and Evil, because you are interested in it as well, or you have a child who loves these books, to enter, all you have to do is subscribe to my YouTube channel, like this video, comment down below what book was the last book that you finished and what you thought about it. And if you could fill out the giveaway survey down below, there will be a link. You'll pick which book that you would like to enter the giveaway for. And then additionally, if you would like an extra entry, you can share this video over on Instagram and tag me, and I will add an extra entry for you. I'll announce the date right here that I'm going to announce the winners. Thank you so much for watching, siblings, and I will see you in the next one. Stay safe and stay kind.
Baby, can you see the snow? Wherever you are, boy, I need to know if I'm on your mind, like you stay in mind.